What's up, guys? Welcome back to another life drawing video. We're going to be going over the foot today. So the foot's an interesting one. It's something that generally we see covered up by something, right? Like usually socks or shoes or whatever someone is wearing. Um, so you don't see a lot of artists drawing this on their characters because usually a part of a character and their costume design would be, like whatever they're wearing, boots, shoes, sandals, all these things. So um, you don't see this as much, and you also don't see it as much in person too. Like if you were to go out and just draw someone, they're most likely going to be wearing shoes depending on where you're drawing. So um, it's something that we don't really get to practice too much in our everyday, but it is something that's really important because like just in general, if you think about your everyday life, this is what's helping you stand up. It's helping you walk. It's what's helping you run. It keeps your balance. And all these things can be related to the characters or the people that you draw as well, right? So we got to think that this is important. This is going to give you a leg up on other people too. Um, if you do know how to draw things like the feet, it looks more impressive to when you show your portfolio. That if you have characters that have like um, really well drawn feet, it just kind of shows that you didn't skip over this, so you're not trying to hide different features, right? So let's jump into this. Of course, I want to go over our bones first here, right? So I'm going to flip this guy so we can look at it a long way. All right. So if you guys can tell, the feet kind of has some similarities to the hands, right? Um, Let me get on nice teacher red color here so we can make scribbles and point at things. But we kind of have the big box of bones up here, and then we have our finger looking bones down here, right? So um, there is a lot that's going on in the feet that are similar to the hands, but then there's also a lot of a difference too. Because if I overlay this now with what it would look like with skin on top, what our feet actually look like, you can see that realistically, even though there's this long bone, all we're seeing and all of our mobility is just like right here, which isn't a lot of that actual bone, right? And it's why your toes don't really have like a crazy range of motion like your fingers have. They're kind of like locked in and constrained, even though there is a long bone in there, similar to like a finger-like structure. Um, but this is important because this is what is helping us keep our balance throughout the day, right? Toes are really important in that way. So we do want to notice that another thing that we do have to talk about too when we're talking about the feet is what's going on up here, right? Because what are these two bones? Those are part of the ankle, which is part of our leg bones, which we'll be discussing for the next video. But in order to discuss feet, we do kind of need to talk a little bit about ankles. So we have our two bones coming down here, and that's what creates this one bump here and this one bump here, and you guys can see that one bump is higher than the other, okay? So those are always going to be on a curve, and it's always going to be the higher one with the big toe and the lower one with the pinky toe, right? So your lower ankle bone or the bump or whatever you want to call it is always going to be on the inside of your foot. All right. Um, these are those bones that are like really close and protruding next to the skin, covered with like maybe it's tiny sheet of muscle, if anything, and then they're the ones that hurt really bad when you hit them against something. So it's easy to remember, but you just got to remember that one's higher, one's lower, right? So okay, let's go in today with the angles that we're gonna draw. So I'm gonna shut these guys off. And we're going to look at this side view of the foot first. So flip it back around. Get a nice zoom in on this guy. Alright, so today what we're going to be drawing is a couple different views. We're going to be drawing the foot from both sides. So you're going to have the side with the pinky toe in the front that leads to the other toes. And then we're also going to do a view from the other side. So like imagine if your camera, right, was over here looking this way. We'll do that view. And then we'll also do a kind of a foreshortened view of what it would look like if you were looking at a foot from the front. Okay, but let's discuss this guy for now since we have this on the screen. What's going on in this view? So in this view, we know that the pinky toe is the smallest. So that's what leads us to be able to see all these toes, right? So we can see them and they kind of follow like a step-like format where they get higher and higher and they get longer and longer as well. And the foot definitely has that arch to it. So whenever you're drawing the foot and you want to draw in the toes, make sure to really play up that fan-like arch shape, okay? Because that's always going to be there, and you want to make sure that you're showing how much bigger the big toe is usually compared to the little toe, even though the little toe's in front still. Other things to notice from this point of view, of course, we have our lower ankle bone here, right? And then we also have no arch in the foot here, okay? Or very little arch, where, you know, we think about feet and we have the arch in our foot usually, right? Unless you're flat-footed. Again, like we're talking about general feet here, not certain conditions, but of course everyone has different feet. Anyways, so from this side we don't see that arch, and it's because we have more mass and more muscle going on here that are leading to all these toes, okay? So they actually just kind of sit there and against the ground, and you guys can see I kind of created that by using these lines right here. They kind of just squish onto the ground, and then they create a nice flat surface, okay? This is where your foot is making contact. This is where your weight is generally distributed too. Like if you're going to lose your balance, you'll probably notice that you're going to be ending up leaning more on the inside of your foot towards the pinky toe rather than the arching side of your foot, which is on, you know, the other side, right? Because you have more contact with the ground on this side, and there's more mass to lean on. Other things with this side, we don't really see too much. The ball of the foot here is not played up too much. And then the arch and stuff like that is pretty much going to look the same. When we're drawing this stuff though, guys, I'm going to show you the proportions, of course, and like how we can grid this out. But when you're drawing these feet on your own characters, you're not always going to want to draw you know, all the proportions, all the guidelines, right? So what you need to be able to do is how to break these down into simple shapes, right? And you basically just have a block or a rectangle and then some kind of wedge shape, okay? This wedge shape can include the feet, or sometimes it doesn't have to include the feet, and then you can come in and add the feet after. However you want to see it, but you do want to be trying to think about these shapes as simple shapes, because it can get so complicated when you just look at, okay, there's the foot, and like so now I'm going to try to draw the foot, and I got this line, and then, or I got this line, and I got a bump, and I got another bump, and then a bump, 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 and then all of a sudden, you know, you start having this weird lumpy shape. So having it break down to a simple shape first, and then coming back in and sculpting your details on there, right? That's what's going to change everything. So, you know, you can go from super basic, and then on top of that basic shape, you can add a little more structure where you're telling yourself, okay, there's a ball of the foot here, I know that. There's a mass that kind of makes contact with the ground, and then that fan shape we were talking about, right, with the feet, like so. Cool. And then looking at this too, I do want to give you guys a view of the bones from every side. Okay, so the ankle bone is coming down, which is what's creating this bump, because it's actually protruding to the side as this bone and this bone insert in there, okay? It's kind of like a ball and socket. So the bones are on top of each other, which is what, you know, it's like your lever point, and the muscles are what's making it move, but the bones are connected. Not connected as in they're fused together, but connected as in they are, like, they work together, if that makes sense. So then, of course, we can see we have all our finger-like bones going down there. And then you can also see the arch, right? Always think about that arch going on in the foot. Just because you can't see it here doesn't mean it's not existing. This bone right here always leads up, and then the toes come back down, okay? You'll see that on the other side too. All right, so let's jump into that other side before I get carried away talking about bones forever. Okay, so now we have the side with the big toe. So what are we noticing? First thing I notice for sure, I'm not seeing any of the other toes. Why? Because this toe is so freaking big that just from this view, and this is like, you know, if I had my face on the ground next to someone's foot kind of a view. So it might not be that realistic. Usually you'd probably be looking from a little higher and you could probably see a few more of the toes anyways. But you can manipulate that as you see fit. Another thing you might want to add is that sometimes the second toe, you know, the one right after the big toe, is usually, it's sometimes a little longer depending on who you're drawing. So you can add that. To be honest though, from this view, it's just going to look weird if you just had a bump in there. So it just plays along better, and it's unnecessary enough that you can just leave it out. Right? So you have the big toe, and what you're going to see here on this view too is a lot of the arches, right? You got this arch for sure. You have a ball right there, and then a big arch right here, and then of course making contact with the ground right there, nice and flat. So this is the side that you're going to see that overarching foot with, and it's partially because what's going on with the bones, and then also what's going on with the muscle structure underneath. But on this side, you're going to get a little more of a carried arch throughout. Okay, you don't have so much of that the heavy bone structure going on that's going on over there on that side that we saw, and you really just have the bone coming in, connecting with the ankle, and then going down to the big toe, right? And again, so this is our big bone of the leg, and so this one's going to create that bump, that higher up bump right here. But you're not going to see the full, like the bump is going to be this huge, but the leg is that big. But what's happening is it's creating a little bump. You guys can see I kind of drew it right here in the white. It's creating a little bump within the bone itself. So that's what's protruding and creating that ankle bone bump. You're not actually seeing the entire bone, because that would be kind of a little creepy. Anyway, so we see that arch. So now let's break this down a little bit. How can we see the simple shapes from this side? Is it any different? Not really. Pretty much seeing the same thing, right? If you really wanted to, you can change this wedge shape to here, and then you can have the thumb shape be a little different if you wanted. But let's say we have this shape already down, and then now we want to break it down a little further with more simple shapes. So you come in here, right? You add the ball shape. We got that. We know this is where it makes contact. Definitely, you know, you'd be erasing that arch into there. And then of course you have that thumb shape, which the big toe and the thumb have a similar shape to them, where it has that round kind of underbelly and then that flat nail side, right? So if I take this off for a second, you guys can see there's a flat side and a round side, okay? That flat side is created by the nail on top. It just kind of gives it that appearance of being straighter on one side and a little rounder on the other side, where it squishes into the ground and makes contact. Okay, so this is the other view that we're drawing today. So let's get all that stuff off, and I'll show you the last view, and then I'll show you how we're going to grid this guy. All right, last view we're drawing. So the front facing foot, probably the most complicated, because what you have to think about in this one is that the foot is coming at you in perspective, okay? That's all right, we're bringing perspective into our life drawing now. So this is what's known as a foreshortened view, which it's called foreshortening because you're having something that's right in front of your face, but realistically this is all going back in space. So this is getting a little smaller. So it looks a little distorted because this stuff is going to seem bigger, just like a building that's closer to you, and this stuff is going to seem a little smaller than you might think it would be because it's going back into space. And then of course in art you do want to exaggerate this stuff a little bit to further emphasize that feeling of space. Okay, so what we already looked at the bones from the front view, so I won't go over those again, but let's talk about the shapes again now, right? So really there's only one shape that I'm like really looking at, and that's going to be that wedge shape again. Or like a trapezoid, I suppose, in this position, where I know it's going to be wider, shorter, right? And then it fans out, it tapers. Okay, so if we're looking at that, and then we can go in and add more to the shape, right? Because now we know we have toes and stuff. So I usually just kind of draw these guys. If I turn this off, you can see. I usually just draw the toes as, at least the first three, as nice just like circles or ovals. This foot from this angle usually takes on a little more of a squared appearance, so you guys can kind of see that. It's a little more flatter around the edges. And then of course the thumb, or I think the thumb, but well, it is essentially the thumb of the foot, but the big toe is a square. It's a nice big rounded square, right? Which you always want to remember, because this is going to be like the dominant toe of the gang, right? It's the biggest one. You want to emphasize that. And it has the most going on. Like even the bones inside, if you remember, they're the biggest that are leading to this toe. So, don't forget to show that in your drawings. Cool. Alright, so these are the views that we're going over today. We can go over this front-facing one first, since it's going to be the most complicated. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up in the corner here. I already got it there. But what are the proportion grids that we can use for this? Okay, so if you can see that light green, I'll go over with a darker color here, or a brighter color. This is the grid I'm looking for. Okay, maybe I'll just use this red while I have it on. Okay, so I need a line, and I need to divide this into 3. Okay, and this needs to be like evenly divided into 3. And when I say even, I mean just like try to get your best eyeball on it. If you guys have a ruler, cool. Use the ruler. You can use the inches or whichever side the centimeters, and make sure they're all even lengths. But if you don't, or you don't want to use it, that's completely fine. Just make sure, if I zoom in here, that this, and this look to be about the same length. They don't have to be perfect. If I turn off the foot, this is what we're looking for, essentially, right? You don't need these lines on the side. I just kind of drew those because I was going quick, but you don't need those lines on the side. And it's just going to look something like this, and this is what our foot's going to fit into. I'm going to draw it with you guys, of course, but just to show you really quick, the idea of what we're looking for is we're looking for this first box, which you can call 1, to be fitting in our big toe. Now the second box fits in second and third toe. The third box here fits in the last 2, okay? And you're noticing too that these aren't fitting in perfectly. This one is all the way over here, but it does curve, right? Our feet have learned to curve over time since we've been squeezing them into shoes for so long. So this is why we see this arching curve. Okay. Another thing we can pay attention to here is that there's always going to be a diagonal going on between these feet. Okay, there's never going to be straight like this, and the pinky toe is going to go all the way along. Don't want to do that. That's going to make your feet look like fingers, and we're trying to avoid that, right? So just remember, small and on an arch, on a curve. And then something that I noticed too when I was first drawing this is that from the big toe to about the top bone of the big toe, this space is about the same amount of space that it's going to take to get to that first ankle bone. So you can, if that helps, divide your foot in half. For me, that helps me a lot because that kind of tells me like, okay, now I know this bump is under that halfway point. It kind of lines up with that halfway line, and then I can start making my comparisons of stuff based on that. Okay, so let me get all this nonsense off the screen here, and I'll get my foot off. Boom, go away, and let's draw this guy. All right, let's choose a little bit of a lighter color. dark brown should be good. Let's see. Yep, I like it. Okay. So what are we starting with now? So we know that we have this grid, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to straight up place a line placement in for where I want my toes to be. So I want my big toe, I know it's going to be here. I know that that next toe is going to be a little longer, and then I know that from here we're going to start seeing like a step format, right? Because the toes are going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to like look for this angle. I'm just going to try to repeat it here. Okay, so something light. Again, you know, these are the lines that we erase at the end, right? So I just want to give myself something like that. And now I can start kind of placing in my toe features, right? So I know that the toe, the big toe, it comes in at a little bit of an arch, because if you remember, the bone follows inward, right? It curves. So I know this comes in at a bit of an arch, and I'm going to kind of just go ahead and draw that square shape I mentioned. Just kind of round it off, see how it feels. You know, I know that this one comes in, it's going to be somewhat longer, and again, I'm looking for that square shape. Like that. So I'm just going to draw a rectangle. I might not keep it that long. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll make it longer. It all depends on what my final turnout is. But really, I'm just trying to place things, see how they look, right? And so now if you remember with the shapes, what I was talking about is I just kind of came in with like an oval shape, because I don't really want to commit to anything just yet. I know if this is going to be the length of my foot, that I do want to recreate this arch somewhere here. So that way I know that the length of the toes is always going to come somewhere up to there. Okay, and you can manipulate that over time too if you want it to be longer or shorter. So okay, I got that one. Let's throw in another one here, and I'm going to start trying to make these ovals a little more on a diagonal, not straight up and down, right? That's because the toes, especially on this side, are getting curved and pushed in because of the shoes we wear, right? Since over time our feet just learn to kind of grow this way. Now, so we fit this guy in, he's on a little bit of an angle, and then the one that's on the most extreme angle and really just kind of smashed in is our pinky toe. Okay, and like smashed in is really the perfect way to think about it, because it really is just like smashed against this other toe. Okay, and you really kind of want to emphasize that. So the bottom's nice and round. I'm going to come in and just kind of detail these out a little bit. Some toes, they can be a little flatter. So like you're going to have some toes that come out look a little flatter, and then some that come and look a little rounder, right? Depending on how much of the side or the front you're seeing. So you want to show that, maybe show a little bit different. So this one's straighter, the last two I have are a little rounder, right? This just brings a little interest, a little variation to your picture as well, which you always want to be thinking about. Like, how can I keep the viewer's attention, even when I'm drawing something as like simple as a foot, right? What can I do to make it a little more interesting, a little more complex, maybe? Cool. So we have our basic shapes in. I'll come back in and add the nails later, because the nail is going to kind of be like that deciding point of like, oh, I'm happy with this and I want to keep it. I don't know if I want to keep these the length they are yet. I want to play around, right? So now what I'm going to look at is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to take, this is my reference. I'm going to take a line and go straight over from here and see where it lands on the other side. And it lands at about the middle point of that pinky toe, okay? So, okay, I can use that now. So I'm going to find my middle point, and I'm going to drag it over. Looks like I could probably take that up a little higher. And that, remember, is where I'm trying to find the bottom part of that bone, or you could say the length of the toe, right? So, okay, I know that. So I'm going to draw a little bit lighter, so it's not like taking over my picture. I see it up there. Okay, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. I'm just trying to get in a general idea. Okay, so now I know that at least this one is probably for sure going to be about that length. Okay, so I could commit to my toes if I want to, but now I want to draw the rest of my feet, because the rest of my foot, because I'm already in it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and draw the bone part, which is going to come up here. And we're kind of trying to stay in that grid that we made, but it's okay if we poke out a little bit. And I'm going to say that the bone part is probably about the same length as the toe itself. So if I know the toe is about this long, I can just kind of apply that, eyeball it right there. Okay. All right. And now if you remember what I was saying earlier, the part from here, the big toe, maybe a little lower than the big toe, to the top of the bone, if I take this and I move this here, it's gonna give me about where that ankle bone is. So I'm just using my fingers, I'm kind of just eyeballing it. It looks like somewhere, actually, maybe a little lower. Let me double check that. Okay, might have got a little long. There we go. I'm gonna say I'm happy with that. Okay, I'll get rid of this a little bit. And that's gonna be where this ankle bone is, okay? Might seem a little short before we draw it, but it'll be good. And then the next thing I'm looking for too is that the shape is fanning out, right? Remember that wedge shape or that trapezoid shape? So I already know that I can just kind of create a light line going inwards. Something I can do if I'm looking at my reference, I can take a line from the middle of my toe and just take it up and be like, oh look, it actually lines up with that point. So I have my toe, I can just take it up. I'm like, all right, so here is where I know that kind of has to create that shape, right? And so I can come in and I can kind of round this off a little bit. You guys can kind of see there's a little bump and a little bump. So let's give it that structure, make it look a little more organic than just a straight line, okay? And I'm going to leave that for now. We'll leave my guidelines in there. And why don't I do the same thing with this toe? So I'm going to say this looks like it's probably not in the middle. Yeah. But if I bring it down, it looks like it actually kind of meets up right where they intersect, or maybe just a little bit into that next toe. So I'm going to take this line up. And notice that this line is higher than this ankle, right? So we do got to keep that curve in there. So if I want, I can go ahead and just kind of place a curve in there for now, just a place mark, and I can say okay. So at least I know that my foot it has to come all the way over here. I know that this is going to create a little bump right here that stays underneath this line. Okay, this is where the like foot is kind of like squishing against the ground, right? And then I can bring it up to here. All right. Something I like to do is I like to think about the foot interlocking with the top of the leg. So from here you can I like to just create like a nice round shape, like something like that. So that way when I come out with my ankles, it's kind of like you're just creating like two pieces that interlocked with each other. So I'm going to go here, bring that shape up, and then this one I know has to be lower, so this helped me stay lower. And this one comes in a little bit more, and the leg's going to be going off a little bit to the side. So I'm kind of exaggerating these bumps a little bit for you guys, but yeah, something like that. And you have your two ankle bones in there, and you can keep this guideline here if you want. You don't have to. And then you can come back in and kind of commit to your toes. So what you would do for your toes is remember that these shapes are all in 3D, right? It's like there's a roundness to each one of these. They're not just flat squares or rectangles or anything. They're more like a cube or a cylinder. So everything you draw, you don't want to draw a flat nail. That's going to flatten your thumb. You want to give it a nice little arch. Okay. And then this gets wider and wider because it's moving back into space, just like in perspective. And then you create that nice thumb shape up top. You can come into, and there's usually a little separation right here between the big toe and the second toe. Right, I can actually take my guidelines off so it doesn't confuse you guys. The separation I'm talking about is like right, wrong layer, is right here. Okay, so like right here where you see a little bit of the webbing of the toe. Okay, I like to create a little roundness on the top of this toe, maybe on a few of the other toes, just to kind of show where the toe begins and the foot, the thick part of the foot ends. You can also kind of go in and draw a knuckle here, kind of towards the middle, you know, where the toe actually bends over. Because remember, they're not just a straight shape, right? And we'll see that more when we're drawing the side views. Um, okay, but you want to think some of these are facing more over and down, right? Some of them, most of the rest of the toes are actually facing down. So instead of doing the arch up, what I'm going to do here is more of an arch down. Okay, so like more of like a curve, like a smile, and then you're going to go up and over. Okay, and kind of tighten this one up a little bit too. And then this one, as the nails kind of go, they're going to get closer and closer to just kind of straight up touching the ground, because they really curve over. Okay, remember these feet have all been like smashed over time in a way of thinking about it, so you're gonna have more um, toes kind of just like toenails where they're just kind of like facing into the ground and kind of smashed down. Okay, so here we go, we have a basic front view of our foot. Okay, and we added in the toenails. You can go ahead and add in a little bit more of the knuckles if you want, whatever you feel like you see. Take a look at your foot, like see the differences. What makes your foot different than this foot? This is just a basic guideline, like everyone's foot is going to be different. Some people are going to have smaller second toes. Some people are going to have really big, big toe, right? And then some people are going to have either maybe even not smashed in feet. Maybe they're going to have straighter toes, and vice versa. You can see really smashed in feet. So there's so much room to play around. This is just kind of the general guideline that you guys can jump off from, right? All right, so let's move on from this guy. We got a lot to cover. Trying to make sure this video doesn't go too long. Next one I want to cover is going to be the side. So let's go back to my side view real quick, and I can turn on the guide that I used, which is right here. All right, so we're back to our box format, right? And if I turn this off for a second, what I want you guys to notice about the box is now we're dealing with an even square. What is an even square? That means that this, can't I draw on this? Okay. That's granular. Okay, so this, no, this side of the square, sorry, I don't know what is going on here, is the same length as this side. And then, same thing. This is the same, this is the same. What do I mean by that exactly? So like if you had a ruler and you were using the inches and stuff, you could say this is 2 inches, this would be 2 inches, this would be 2 inches, this would be 2 inches, okay? Or whatever measurements you want to use for however big of a paper you're going to use, okay? Just remember that if you are doing this, you just have to have enough room to fit in 3 boxes that are all the same. So like 2 inches. Hold on, man. Let me draw on my thing. There we go. 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, which that's going to add up to 6 inches, right? So make sure you have a paper that's long enough if you're going to draw it bigger than that, okay? And then same thing, right? We need at least 2 inches of space up top. Now, or more. You guys are choosing the guideline for that. So now we're fitting in this foot, right? And you guys can kind of see it breaks the barrier a little bit, okay? So we're going to be thinking about that. But this is really to think about, we're trying to keep our feet into some sort of guideline, some sort of restriction. This is kind of to help us just find some of the landmarks of it, right? So we can just think about certain things of like, okay, so this part of the ankle, it comes down pretty close to that first box. I know that all of this heel of the foot and the ankle bone is all contained within that first box. Okay, we can do that. I know that in this second box, we're still not seeing any toes. We are seeing the foot start to slope, and we're seeing what's going on down here where the foot's making contact with the ground, and maybe the beginning of the pinky toe, but that's about it. Otherwise, from there, we're fitting all of our toes into this next box. Okay, and from here, so we just have our big toe. We're trying to look at it from the side, so we're thinking about that step kind of format. And you guys can see that these toes too, they go forward, down, and then out. It's just like a step. That's the best way to explain it, because it's going to go forward, step, and something like that, right? And then of course the toe goes back down. So you have like a step kind of format. Okay, so those are going to be our guidelines. I have our reference up in the corner. So let's go ahead and jump to that. I'll turn this guy off, and I'll go to my open layer here, and let's draw. All right. So things I'm thinking about. I want to think about those basic shapes first. I know that if you guys remember, my ankle is going to come somewhere from here. My other one is going to come somewhere from here. Okay, we got that. Nice and light. Don't have to fully commit to it if you want smaller ankles or thicker ankles. Next, I know that this is going to come down, and that heel of the foot was just about fitting in to this box. Okay, so I can fit it in there. I can give it a little bit of a roundness, but remember on this side, the foot stays pretty much flat. So all I have to do is draw a line. I can even go into that second box already, because I know that the foot's going to stay flat against the ground there. Okay. There we go. We already have almost like half of our foot in already, thanks to this box structure. So now what I'm thinking too now is I have this slope. Okay, so I want that slope in there. I want this nice angle. You guys want to really make sure you play that angle up. So don't do an angle like this, because then you have a really thick foot and your toe is going to be all the way up here. Remember, there's a grouping of bones here, and then they get tinier and tinier and tinier as they go down. So show that by showing a nice deep slope. Okay, I'm going to add the little muscle that we see right here, a little bump it creates. And then for the most part, I'm just going to kind of go down and see what kind of slope I want to create. I think I want a little thicker, or a little lower maybe. Okay, and then I know it's going to come up a little bit, and then create a little bump there. And that's where I'm going to stop for a second and look at it and see if I like it. Okay, looks pretty good to me. I mean, I could probably go a little bit lower if I wanted to, but I can also play that up and get rid of a little bit of this mess up here. Okay, but if your paper is looking messy, that is the point, right? We're practicing. I want you guys to be trying different things. I'm actually looking at this now, and I want this to be a little shorter so I can make the big toe a little bigger. Okay, all right, so now what are we doing? When I first drew this, the hardest part about this is making sure that you have the toes like fan out all the way. Best thing to do is that pinky toe. If I show the drawing again, that pinky toe is going to be right there, right here on the side of that line. Okay, so let's get that in first. So I'm going to go ahead and just boom, I'm just going to draw a circle shape like a place mark. And then I'm probably going to keep that idea. So I want to make sure it's stepping up as it goes through. So I'm kind of just going to draw myself maybe like a loose arch fan shape here. I know my big toe is going to come somewhere around here, and it's almost going to touch the ground. So I can place that in too. So now we have our starting point and end point. Okay, so now we just have to fill the in-betweens. So let me go ahead and just kind of flesh out my big toe a little bit. Remember, there's a bump, and then it connects. Okay, because you got a joint in there, and then this also kind of creates that nice thumbnail shape too. Okay, kind of jumping a little ahead there, but there we go. And again, we can come in and adjust that as we like. I know, I'm going to erase into this a little bit. I know that the next toe is going to have to be somewhere around here. It's probably going to touch the bottom of that line. And if I look up here, I can see that it almost converges with my big toe at the end there. So I just give myself a loose guideline for now. I'm just going to put a nice big angle right here. Okay. Again, we're just trying to figure this out first before we commit to that detail. We don't want to go in too deep, realize we messed up, and then get frustrated. That's where the worst things happen, right? All right. So now I have big toe, somewhat of a second toe, and I have the placement of my pinky toe. I need 2 more toes in there, so I'm going to just kind of figure them out with a nice circle shape. I'm thinking about my circle shape touching this arch I made, so I can show that the toes are fanning out. And then last one is just going to be somewhere around here. And okay, I want this one to be a little thicker than this one, so now I'm going to come in, make that adjustment. All right, there we go. So looking at this, I'm happy with the placement so far. I won't really know until I start adding in some detail. So let's add some detail. So if there's an arch down here, there's got to be an arch going on up here too, okay? So there's that. I know that this foot here, we're going to come in 1 foot at a time. This one, we need to kind of create that joint step again, okay, right? So we have a bump, and then this one's going to connect somewhere up there. And we know that nail is there, but we'll come back and hit the nail a little later. This one, you have a little more of a straightness to it. It's a little longer. We see a little bit more of the bottom. So we'll come in. We got that bump going up. This one also almost comes up, and then it goes over, okay? Now, this one, we're seeing a little more of a roundness here, a little less of that nail. So that's why we get less of that square shape. Comes up and then over. Okay. And of course, cannot forget the pinky toe, which you guys can really see it's kind of curled over here, right? Again, like really thinking about that, like, I know I keep saying it, but that like smashed idea of that toe. This poor toe takes a lot of a beating because it's the one that's always against the edge of your shoes, where your shoes create that nice point, right? Depending on what kind of shoes you're wearing too. You know, if you're wearing like heels or something like that, you can definitely feel this to an extreme degree. But even like just natural running shoes and stuff, all these shoes kind of have a point that smash our toes in. Okay, so there we go. I can look at that. I'm pretty happy with that. I think the toes maybe are a little big, but I'm okay with that. And then I'm going to go ahead in and add in the nail. So I want to commit to a little bit bigger of a nail on the big toe. Looks like you can see a good amount of the nail here on the second toe. Okay, a little less of the nail shape coming in here for this toe. Almost all the way on the side of the foot there. This one is just, it's starting to get pushed down. These toes are starting to go downwards. And then this one really is just boom, it's right there on the side, just a little bit, just like so. Okay. What are we missing from this? Well, you can show where it kind of makes contact and squishes with the ground if you want. Right, we have that. This little here, this is kind of just showing where that bone of the foot is, right? That bone that kind of creates that arch shape we were talking about. And then of course we have our ankle shape, which if you guys remember is lower on this side. So let's just make sure we pay attention to how low you're putting it. Okay, how much lower than the line of the boxes that we use for our grid are we putting it, right? And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. There we go. Okay, let's jump into the last one and we'll get this done. I know this is going a little bit long, but there's a lot of detail on the foot, so I apologize, but just stick with me. This is the last one, we're almost there, and this is my favorite angle of the foot to draw if I had to choose one. Okay, I mean, it's a little weird to say I have a favorite angle of the foot, but it exists, and here it is. Alright, so pretty much the same basic shapes we're looking for, right? I got my slope, I have my ankle bone that's a little higher. You can see it's actually on the line here. Okay, so we got those things in mind. We're thinking more about a ball shape here because we have that arch. Alright, so we got that. And we know that all we can see is that big toe. That should be like a huge relief, a huge sigh of relief that we don't have to draw all those other toes going on, right? We have such an easier angle on this side. I love it. So let's get straight to it. Remembering our placement of things like the ankle stays in the same spot pretty much. All that stuff. I'll go through it with you guys. Yep, there it is. Okay. Now, oops. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, so just going straight into this, right? Sorry if it's going a little quicker. I just don't want this video to be so long for you guys. But yeah, so here we go. We got our ankles in here. Same placement as the last one, okay? We're gonna come in, and I really want to think about this side being rounder, like so. Okay, we got a flatness here, and then we know that this foot arches up and back down, and then again we have that flatness here. Okay, and this is going into that other square as well. Okay, you can really play this up if you want. It all depends on what kind of, how much of a stylized foot that you want to show. Sometimes it looks really nice if you play it up a good amount. And then I know that there's another arch maybe around here, and I'm just going to throw that in really quick now and decide if I want to keep it later, just so I can place in my big toe. So look, I kind of just came in and I thought about all my ground points. Ground point, ground point, ground point. Okay. If you were inking or doing something where you're committing to a black line, this is where it would be the darkest and the thickest. Okay. If that makes sense, because that's where you're showing it making contact with the ground. So like in an ink drawing, that's where you would be showing it being the darkest, because that's where it would be creating a shadow. Anyways, sidetracking lesson right there. So here we go, we got the bump of our foot right there where the ankle is connecting to the toe, or sorry, the foot, right? And we can see this has a little more of that step format, because our bone is a little bit higher on this side. So we're going to go ahead and create that, just kind of come out over here. And then for the most part, it's just coming down with that arch. And remember, we're not committing to too dark of a line here. We still have some things going on here. I know there's a bump here. Okay, see, there's a bump right here. Okay, so right here. So let's get that in. There's a little bump. Should be fine there. Okay, I'm going to kind of darken that in a little bit. And then here I'm going in, down for that knuckle. We're going to go up, down, and then create that nail shape. And now I can kind of look at this and decide if I, like there's a lot of mess going on here, right? So I can kind of come in, erase some of my lines and say, all right, well, I want this to be a little longer. So I want my thumb nail to go a little longer. And then there we go, something like that maybe. Looks better to me. And remember, this is a nice little roundness to it. Same here, we have what would be a straight side and a round side. Don't forget that. Really helps play up that kind of thumb looking shape for the big toe. We have our arch here, which you can show. And then, yeah, you don't see too much more detail on this side of the foot other than that nail. So I can come in and draw that nail. I just wanted to erase that to clean it up a little bit. So you're going to see a little bit of the side, and then it comes up, and then connects into there, okay? Alright, so we have that. Remember, this is just our arch shape, okay? Try not to think or worry too much about all these bumps. First try to get in that straight, and then come back in and carve those bumps into there. And just think about where those bones were, right? Like, I could probably lower this a little bit, because that seems a little extreme. And do something like that, and it might look a little better. Maybe that's not such a dramatic bump, right? You just gotta kind of come around and play around with it. See what you think looks best. Okay. All right. And then last thing is our ankle bone, right? So we know that that is a little bit higher. So my last one I drew here. So this one I'm going to draw here. Okay. Just to kind of keep that idea of knowing that this side, the ankle bone is a little bit higher. And I like to just draw it going up a little bit, because it's like you would see a little bit of the trace amount of the bone. Okay. You can maybe show a little bit of your Achilles tendon right there. Cool. And there we have it. We have the foot from 3 different angles, okay? So if I turn this bright green grid off, this is what we have. Remember, we're just kind of thinking about that arch shape, looking for the simple shapes we have going on here, right? Try not to overcomplicate this because it can get easily overcomplicated. But you can always come in and make your changes later. Like I can say like, all right, you know what? I want this arch to be bigger, right? I don't know. I just prefer it to be a bigger, thicker arch. Or you can come in and try to draw someone who's flat-footed where they don't actually have an arch. What does that look like? You know, look up your references. Don't try not to just imagine these things, especially something where it's complex. Look up a reference first. Try to draw the foot from different angles. These are just guidelines. This is a starting point. You guys can jump off from this point, right? So hope that all made sense, guys. We'll talk soon. Thanks for watching again, and if you guys have any questions or suggestions for the next video, please let me know in the comments, alright? Alright guys, thanks.